What's the connection between keto and the Indian language movie Badla? Stick around to find out. Okay, you guys, that's silly. That's so silly, but it's true. Keto led me to this movie. I shall explain. I subscribe to a channel on YouTube called Headbanger's Kitchen, and some of you might be aware, or maybe you're not aware. I actually interviewed the guy who is behind that channel. His name is Sahil. Sahil? Okay, whatever. I interviewed Headbanger's Kitchen. I always want to just call him Headbanger's Kitchen, but his name is Sahil. And I interviewed him because of keto and everything. It was a very, very interesting discussion. I'm still subbed to his channel, still watch his videos. And somehow this video of his was either recommended or he had posted it up in the community, a community post. You know how you sometimes try to bring attention to older videos. And so maybe that was what he had done, or either YouTube decided it was time to show me the video. So I watched the video. I'd never seen it before, even though I've watched a lot of his stuff. And during the video, his father and his brother were on there taste testing this delicious recipe that he had made. And he's often had them on there before, so it wasn't unusual to see them at all. But what was unusual about this particular video was that his father specifically mentioned a movie that his brother was in. I can't remember his brother's name. Shom or something like that. I'll try to remember to put it up in the description. And it was a movie called Badla. So I was like, oh, that's cool. Sahil's brother is in a movie. I'm going to check it out. You know, because you feel like you got a little bit of connection there with people that you're sort of familiar with on YouTube. And so I looked into it, checked it out, saw that it was on, looked into it on Letterboxd, saw that it was on Netflix. Awesome. So I watched it very, very quickly after I saw that particular video. So it's been, I don't remember the exact date, but it's sometime back in April, maybe mid-April, that I saw this movie. And I started watching it, and maybe before I'd started watching it, actually, I looked it up and found out that it's a remake of a Spanish language movie called Contratiempo, or the English title is The Invisible Guest. I do know about this movie. I had actually started watching it before a couple of times. Didn't get very far because I was watching it in Spanish, and I was kind of frustrated because I couldn't completely understand everything they were saying because I'm not on up there with my Spanish like I would like to be. So I was familiar with the premise. So I was like, oh, okay, so this is a remake. And what they did was they gender swapped the main characters in this movie. So in the Spanish language movie, the lawyer is a woman and the main character is a guy, or like these two main characters. In the Indian language version, the lawyer is a man and the main character, or like the client, is a woman. And I've put up pictures from both movies here because while this is going to be a review of Badla, it's also, by extension, a review of Contratiempo. So I immediately watched Contratiempo after I had seen Badla because I wanted to compare the two. I wanted to see, okay, which one is better? And it's so weird because I watched these in reverse order, just like I watched Old Boy in reverse order. I watched the American version and then I watched the original. I prefer the American version. I know that probably sounds really blasphemous to say. It's pretty rare that I prefer a remade version of something over an original whenever I've seen it. In this case, I almost feel like I prefer the Indian language version, Badla, because that was my first exposure to the entire story. Anyway, it's a very interesting premise. And this is a movie or a screenplay story. I don't know if it's based on a book, but it's very clever. The writing is clever. And it really fooled me because you think you understand what's at play, and there's so much more than what you think. And I'm going to try to be as vague as I can because I really don't want to give away any twists and turns or any extensive detail about the plot, but I will tell you the basic premise of it. And the premise is there's a couple. The premise is exactly the same in both movies, by the way. There's a couple. They are having affairs on each of their respective spouses. And they end up, well, it starts off with this lawyer coming to this person's house. I don't know if they're under house arrest or whatever. They've been arrested. They're released on bail or whatever until this trial is supposed to happen. And the entire movie takes place in a series of flashbacks, or the entire telling of the story takes place in a series of flashbacks. And the present day is this attorney and the client, and they're talking. And the client is telling the attorney the story, basically what has happened. The client has been arrested for murder. So during the course of the story, you find out bits and pieces of what happened that brought the client to this situation that they're in, this legal trouble that they're in. And basically what happens is the client is having an extramarital affair with someone who is also cheating on their spouse. So they're both cheating on their spouses with each other. They get into some trouble. And from that point is this series of events that happens that involves things like blackmail and threats and trying to silence things. And it culminates in this death that occurs, and the client is suspected of being responsible for this death. So it's this mystery that's going on, and you're taking the journey with the lawyer as the lawyer is hearing this story told to them. And it's super clever. I've already mentioned that before. I'm still going to say it because it's clever. It's so interesting how the plot was woven together. And I was so impressed with it that I wanted to talk about it with you guys in case you've never heard of it. Now, I know that people who are interested in Spanish and or Spanish language movies, this movie, the Spanish language version of it, The Invisible Guest, i.e. Contratiempo, has been brought up multiple times as a really good Spanish language movie to watch, especially if you're trying to learn Spanish and things like that. And like I said, had never heard of Badla until I watched that video on Headbangers Kitchen's YouTube channel. And I'm so glad I actually took the time to watch it right then, like really, really quickly, because I don't know why I put off watching The Invisible Guest. No, I do know why. I don't know why I didn't go back to it and just plop on the subtitles and just go ahead and go with it, because this is a fascinating story and it keeps you guessing. You really are like, wow, how are they going to get out of this terrible situation they're in? How are they going to prove innocence? And what is going to happen? There's so much. And then when you get to the end, it's like, holy cow, that was amazing. Maybe I'm just easily impressed sometimes, but I don't think it's just me. This movie has fairly solid reviews on Letterboxd, and Letterboxd can be a tough crowd sometimes. So typically, if a movie has 3 stars and up on Letterboxd, you know it's probably worth the watch. And both of these have 3.5 and up. I think maybe one has 3.5, maybe the other has 3.7 or 8, something like that. Both Badla and Contratiempo have really solid ratings, and I can totally understand why. And unlike the mess that was the movie Agent that I walked out of yesterday when I went to the movie theater, this movie has no music video in it. Thank goodness. And it feels very grounded in reality. Like the acting's not over the top and ridiculous. It just feels very authentic, and it feels very real and true to life. Just like Manal Morali did, even though Manal Morali was about something that's not, that was a bit supernatural-ish with regard to these people getting superpowers. But that movie, the way those people acted and the way the story flowed, it just felt more grounded in some reality as opposed to some other Indian movies I've seen like Pathan, which was pretty John Wicky, and then Agent, which was just awful. So I highly recommend this movie or both of these movies to you if you're interested in watching this really intelligently written, trying to come up with another word other than clever. If you're interested in watching something that's just very solid, and it starts you off here with how you feel about something. And then when you end up, you've had a complete reversal of your sentiments. And I really can't get specific because that might give away some stuff. But I loved how it took you on this journey and you start in one place with a certain set of notions and ideas and opinions. And when you come to the end, you have a completely or pretty much completely different thought process about it or feeling about it. At least I did. I was just fascinated by how the writing was able to do that. And I haven't been able to get these movies out of my brain. There was a quote, I think it was a quote in Badla, pretty sure because it's towards the top of my notes. And I watched Badla first, like I said, and then I watched Contratiempo, and the notes I took for that are lower down. But I believe it was a quote in here, something about, so the lawyer's trying to get information from the client. The lawyer wants the details. In fact, that's a word that's often mentioned in both of the movies. The details, the details, blah, blah, blah. And the quote was, everybody views truth differently. I thought that was interesting because that's true. People can look at the facts of a situation. And by facts, I don't mean what's loosely deemed as facts in, like, let's say, a lot of mainstream media, which are very often their interpretation of the facts. I'm talking about actual facts, looking at hard facts, how you can view these facts, and facts are truth, okay? How you can look at these facts. Different eyes can look at these facts, and they can view them completely differently. I can look at something and view it a certain way. Somebody else with a completely different set of viewpoints or ideas or whatever can look at those same facts and reach a completely different conclusion than maybe I would. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And it's it's something that's at play here. As the story progresses, you'll know what I'm talking about. The differences between the two movies. One of the differences that I noticed was, no, I'm going to leave that out. That might give a little bit too much detail, but the differences are, number one, the gender swap that I already mentioned. And in the Spanish language version, the title of the movie, the Spanish language title of the movie, is referenced multiple times. Contratiempo means a setback. And that is said at least 2 or 3 times from what I heard. Badla means revenge. That's not mentioned at all, I don't think. I'm not exactly sure why the English language title for Contratiempo was turned into The Invisible Guest, but maybe that's just because it sounds a bit more dramatic and exciting than to say The Setback. Yeah, that's probably why. It does sound better. So there's not a ton of differences. There's that one. There's the gender swaps, like I also said. I felt like the lighting in Contratiempo was a bit darker than the lighting in Badla, but that might have just been my screen. I don't know. There's another change that happens. One of the changes has to do with footprints that is specifically mentioned in Badla and talked about in Badla, but in Contratiempo, that doesn't come up at all. And I'm not going to even tell you anything about that, what that means, but I'm just trying to remember things that were actual clear differences between the two. The only other difference that I noticed was there's a scene where the client is telling their story, whether it's the guy in the Spanish language version or the girl in the Indian language version. They're telling the story of some events that happened, and there's some people that they meet. In the Indian language movie, they meet 2 people, these 2 particular people at the same time. They meet a husband and a wife. When that same scene happens in the Spanish language version, it's only the husband that is met first, and then later the wife is met at a different location. I'm not exactly sure why they changed that. That's just more of an observation. It doesn't necessarily make it any better or worse. I've just noticed that was a significant change that was made. It's not really anything that significantly affects the plot. It's just something that stuck out to me because I was trying to look for differences. But other than stuff like that, both movies are virtually identical to each other. It's almost a shot for shot or scene for scene replication of Contratiempo, Badla is. And it was so weird to go from having watched Badla, where the main character is the girl, and then Contratiempo, where the main character is the guy. And it's weird because I kept forgetting stuff or getting some stuff confused. Now, wait a minute, what? Oh, but that's because it's a guy this time instead of a girl. Stuff like that. As far as the gender swap, and those aren't things that I'm generally a fan of at all. But I found that in the case of this particular story, it didn't really make a difference. It didn't affect the outcome. It didn't affect my feelings about the story. It didn't affect my feelings about the characters. So in this case, it was something that was handled pretty well. I'm not exactly sure why they made the gender swap, unless they were trying to keep the fundamentals of the story, but offer enough of a change that maybe made it feel justified to do an actual copy of this original story. I honestly don't know. I couldn't tell you 100% which one I prefer, even though I feel a little bit more favoritism for Badla because I saw that first. And as far as quality, to me, they're both pretty much the same. I really liked how that once you know what happens, and then you watch, so like I watched Badla and then I watched Contratiempo, like I said, but because I already knew the story and expected that it would probably end up being exactly the same or very close to the same, I noticed things that had completely gone over my head when I watched Badla, my very first exposure to this story. It's kind of like, almost like The Sixth Sense. You know how once you've seen The Sixth Sense, when you rewatch it, you pick up on all these little clues that were given? Same sort of thing happened with this movie. You notice things that you didn't notice before. I mean, I guess that happens in any movie where there's a mystery, but some mysteries, they really don't leave many or any clues in the telling of the story, but in this particular one, there are clues scattered throughout. I'm curious to know if anyone has watched these movies and was able to accurately guess what was happening or what was going to happen. I just liked the subtle directing of attention away from certain things, like having these little clues there, but directing your attention away from it. It was so well done. I can't get over how well done it was. And it ties back around to that quote that I mentioned about how everybody views truth differently. You look at certain things and you think a certain thing, but somebody else can look at something and think something totally different. And these films did an excellent job at the storytelling. And I'm normally not the hugest fan of flashbacky stuff, but in the case, not that I hate it, but a lot of times I like to be like, show me what's happening now. But flashback is often important for purposes of the way you want to tell the story. Anyway, I just appreciated these films and wanted to recommend them to you guys. If you like mysteries, it's not something that's super action-packed. It's a mystery, like a mystery drama. I would say thriller, but there's not really huge moments of thrill that's happening. It's mostly these events and you being told a story about events that played out, what caused this client to be in this position that they're in. So nothing high octane, nothing super adrenaline pumping or anything like that, but just a really solid mystery. One of the better ones I've seen, and I enjoyed it so much that I had to tell you guys about it. Badla is currently available on Netflix. The Invisible Guest is only available on like streaming platforms where you can rent or buy or whatever. So if you don't want to outlay any money to see it, but if you have Netflix, you could go watch Badla and you're going to have pretty much the same experience that you would if you watched Contratiempo. Honestly, both of these films are the same quality. From what I could tell. That was the impression that I came away with, that they're both equally solid. Badla, like I said, might have ratings that are just a skosh lower than Contratiempo. Maybe that's just because some people, they just don't like remakes. I don't know. I didn't read the reviews. I just looked at the Letterboxd score. But yeah, just super impressed. If you guys have seen The Invisible Guest, maybe you didn't know that a remake has been made. And now I'm curious to find out if there's been an English language remake of these movies. I haven't heard of anything like that. I didn't read further into it, so I don't know. I want to say I don't think so. Honestly, I believe I would have heard about it by now if there had been. But it wouldn't surprise me if they would do one. Contratiempo came out in 2016. Badla came out in 2019. Anyway, I think that's about it. I've gone through most of my notes, skipped over stuff that I felt might give away too much. I want you guys to just go into this as blind as possible. If you've seen either one of these films, let me know if you enjoyed it as much as I did. And if you haven't seen them and you watched them or one of them, let me know if you were as impressed with them as I was. And let me know if you guessed what was going to happen, because I kind of bet you didn't. I'd be surprised. Honestly, I'd be surprised. Okay, I don't have anything else, so I'm going to wrap this up. This did go on quite a bit longer than I intended, and I have things I need to take care of, so I will see you guys later. Adios.